some ways to communicate better, because we know we're not doing a good job.
I think visual storytelling is always going to be your best aspect. It does mean you need to spend a little bit of time creating the visual story, because it usually involves taking pictures as well as just writing things down. You know, if the person has, like, if it's about using one particular room to go study in, for instance, you know, taking a picture of the hall that you walk down to go there. First, let's walk down this hall, then taking a picture of the room. You know, I'm assuming that they can read. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, so, and then, you know, showing the picture, and if they can't, really sometimes it just means a more complicated lesson, but it's the pictures, the photographs that you take that are really going to probably help that nonverbal image individual the most. I mean, obviously talk to the caregivers too. I mean, I would imagine that, you know, they're probably doing things like social stories, which is a method of teaching folks to, you know, do X, Y, or Z, as opposed to the lecture format with reciprocal conversation. But yeah, I would say definitely picture books and creating storytelling of your own to, you know, get accomplished what you want to get accomplished is going to be your best bet.
I don't know if this is too personal a question, but I'm wondering, I figured it wouldn't be. As a parent of a child who's been diagnosed with autism, is there any ways that you're thinking about school consultation or treatment or any of the issues you've talked about today changed as a parent of a child with autism?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you saying that in my capacity as not only an individual on the spectrum but a parent of a child on the spectrum, do I bring any of that experience to my work as a school consultant? Is that it? And I'm sorry if I'm not understanding it.
Well, so I'm a mental health professional, and I feel like my interactions with parents, families, schools, clients, children has changed a lot since I've become a parent. I just wonder if there's any new perspectives that you've had as a parent that have made your thinking or work evolve or change in some way.
I think that especially, you know, once my, you know, sort of guard rang up when I saw that things were, shall we say, behind, you know, here when I got here, that my initial inclination was to speak only on behalf of the kid in a very brutalist, shall we say, manner. Which I've, you know, successfully, you know, ironed out a little bit better, you know, so it's slightly more diplomatic, but it still ruffles feathers. And I think that one of the things that I've sort of realized is that I've been really struggling with the concepts of how to share, you know, the news, you know, that things are behind, or that, you know, we're snootier than you are because, you know, we come from New York or anything like that. And I think that one of the things that I've really been struggling with is the whole aspect of being nice, because people are nicer here. I get that, much nicer. But I also can tell you that I've also really come to believe that there's a massive difference between being good and being nice. And I'm sure that lots of people in certain parts of Poland thought of their non-Jewish neighbors as being very, very nice. They waved to each other probably as they were mowing lawns or what have you. And then the Germans came and those neighbors might have been like, oh, you guys just sit, we'll push them on the trains for you. And I can also remember back in my UN days, I got to spend time, a decent amount of time, with a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a Nobel Peace Prize nominee on 2 separate occasions. And these people taught you what it was to do good and to be good. And these people were unbearable to be around. They were not nice. They were not nice at all. And it's a balance, and I'm still sort of struggling with that, but I have long since believed that I want to be good rather than I want to be nice. And I think that, you know, I feel very lucky actually that there are some few pearls in this area that recognize that and that allow me to feed my family. Thank you for that question, though. I appreciate it. Bam!
Okay, that's one.
No middle ground.
The first one was part of your PowerPoint. You expressing the fact that families should continually bring their children or adult children out in the community.
Amen.
The second one was the sports component. Doing sports in the morning before learning. Have you ever explored the possibilities of music and dance?
I had put at the bottom of the slide, no slight to the arts. And
Okay.
what I meant by that was that I wasn't going to have a slide about the arts because I actually think it's an area in which we're actually doing a good job. We're not funding those programs. Usually it's music and dance that get cut as the first things out of a school budget. But you know, the whole notion of being able to create in the midst of a horrible situation is something that's imperative to all people, especially individuals with disabilities. So I apologize if it looked like I was, you know, sugarcoating that aspect of things, but no. I
No,
believe that.
it's okay. The reason why I asked this because I have an exercise and dance program, and the reason why we created it in my agency, everything actually that I think of, because I'm a parent of a 29-year-old son with autism, and he's nonverbal, and he loves to dance, loves music, and so I communicate a lot of things with him through song and through dance. And so I was just wondering why that wasn't.
That's really cool. I'd love to see that in action. That's really cool. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you some slides.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Hi. Sorry, just to interest one sort of thing you kind of touched on. I know this is kind of your forte, but does what public policies, laws, etc., government programs in place make a big difference in all this that you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you know, if something is properly funded, then people are going to be able to do what the mission was designed to do in the first place, as opposed to scrambling to put together some semblance of, let's say, 25% of what that mission could entail.
It's kind of interesting. One thing that I've noticed in recent months, I mean months, like the past 6 months or so, is that all of a sudden a lot of people I know in the field, who work in this field, have basically suddenly become lobbyists in the best possible sense.
Cool.
They are going to Springfield, they are going to Washington in some cases, and speaking as a Midwesterner, I think good isn't necessarily the same as nice, but never think the two are mutually exclusive. I have known some very nice people who will absolutely cut you if you try to stop them from doing good. Just because they're polite about it doesn't mean they aren't determined.
Neighbor, that is an excellent point, and I stand corrected.
They're not necessarily the same, but don't think they're mutually exclusive.
You're right. That's just my New York angst.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing to remember, but also the opposite can also be true.
Other questions? Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Didn't see your hand. Glasses and hearing aids. Sometimes I miss a lot.
Hello, hi. It's good to see you, Michael John. You were a speaker at our conference in 2006 at Ascend in San Francisco.
Oh,
at the Autism Summit. Anyway, okay, I have a question for you. I come from a family of academics and people who, and a number of them are on the spectrum, including me. I wonder, so I really like that slide you showed at the beginning to show the list of all those creative people who are nominally or possibly on the spectrum. I agree with many of the diagnoses, people like Alan Turing and Emily Dickinson and so on. If you look at the stories, it makes sense. But it's funny that in the discussion of autism today, there's like a big gap between those people and then the people that most of the programs are addressed to. In my family, we needed programs that were addressed to the social needs largely of people who were closer to that list there. my question to you is, have you encountered any discussion of that or programs directed to the, say, the gifted and talented autistic people?
I wouldn't say that there are a tremendous amount of programs to, really develop those individuals' talents. But one of the reasons why we started GRASP in the first place was to provide forums for individuals to be able to share with each other what it was like to have these experiences that when, they tried to describe them to the outside world, it was, oh, you're just making excuses, oh, you think so highly of yourself. Anything that really presented as different was sometimes just kind of slammed in the outside community. So when, you suddenly see people actually having shared experiences for the first time and suddenly realizing, okay, everybody here has the same juice as I have. And, or everybody, and it's the same concept in all other levels of diversity and inclusion. That person looks like me, so I can trust them more. And in those contexts, what you're describing, somebody would say something that was, something they'd been shouted down for, let's say, outside, and then suddenly they're met with somebody else in the room saying, I've been there too. I hear exactly what you're saying. And the response that you would see to that was, to me, it was just like near biblical.
Yeah, well, I just want to follow on that. Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like a fish in water when I'm around other people on the spectrum. We speak the same nonverbal language. And yet what often happens to people who are gifted is that their talents obscure their autism. They say, oh, this is a gifted person. They put them into a gifted and talented program. And then they crash and burn down the line because of the social deficits.
You're right, but here's the thing. You have to be grateful for being recognized for those talents, because when they're not recognized for any talents, they slip through the cracks. In the earlier years, they slip through the cracks and they are never to be seen again. I'm one of those same people. The only reason why I escaped all that was because people thought I was talented. You know what? People thought I was a lot more talented than I actually really am, but I'm still grateful for that.
Coming up to the front.
So do you have any really great stories about employers being inclusive and or supporting a really great disclosure process?
Yes. I thought you were about to ask really just great inclusive environments, and I was like, oh man, shoot, am I gonna go Silicon Valley with the ping pong tables, or how am I gonna, because I don't really know of any that are just like so just hippy-dippy that they make everything work. But on a disclosure basis, yes, I have heard a lot of stories like that. And again, it really usually has to do with the emotional level of the person that's disclosing and the educational level as well as the emotional level of the person that's receiving the disclosure. And there have been plenty of disclosure situations where the employer has said, oh my gosh, I thought you just hated it here. I thought that was what was going on. And I'm so glad to hear that you do like it here and that you want to work here. Because we really like you, we're just confused. We just thought you hated it. And it's great. Now that we know, we can work with you on this, we can talk about this. And there's been plenty of stories like that, actually.
So then would you advise that a person discloses during an interview or right after the interview, or like right in and around after they've passed their first year probation?
I believe in the if it ain't broke, don't fix it philosophy. I know other people on the spectrum who stand up at podiums like me might say something differently. But I would say that, it's really got to be based on both need and trust. And the trust part we've already talked about. If you're hitting it off with your coworkers, you're hitting it off with your boss, it's maybe something to slip into a conversation, see how that resonates with people. And if it works out as it should, since you're probably right, you're not definitely right about how they feel about you, then that's a fantastic new connection that they've just made with you. But I would say, though, that if things aren't going so well, then, and I'm glad you asked this because I probably should have put this in the presentation, is that if things are not going so well, here's how you want to disclose. You don't want to disclose verbally at all. You want to do it in writing. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, you want to send your disclosure in writing not only to your supervisor, but also your supervisor's supervisor. And number two, the reason for that is that if there are issues at this work, then maybe, let's say, your boss has some animosity towards you. When somebody reads that you're disclosing that you have a certain condition, they're going to have a reaction. And you are giving them the space to have whatever bigoted, stupid, ugly reaction that they want to have upon reading your email or your letter without knowing that they're being watched by you, because it's a reciprocal conversation. Give it to them in writing, so let them handle it or not handle it in their own weird way, and then they process it and then they go, unfortunately, I have to process this through HR, I have to do what's right, yada, yada, yada. So that way you don't have to deal with the ugly reaction. And eventually you give them the time to come to terms with it and let them get started on the process towards HR knowing about your disability.
Hi. This is more of a comment. You talked about one of the barriers to employment, the question of the resumes and taking risks and losing jobs and things like that. But one of the problems, in this environment, I think one of the things people really need to know is that one of the barriers on the resume is that they don't have experience. People don't have experience. And that's where we come in as professionals and also as librarians. We need to be hiring part-timers with autism. We need to be making sure that we have autistic volunteers, and we need to be making these changes at our level, the same way we do for other students in our neighborhoods, so that when they become older, that they have that experience that they need, and that they have that really critical workplace environment experience, knowing a chance to learn that invisible code where it's much more difficult. Much less difficult, where it's much easier and supportive because they're younger and because we all know this is their first experience.
Thank you, Carrie. That's an excellent point.
Hello. I've worked in special education as a classroom assistant, inclusion and non-inclusion, for like 5 years now. And I was just curious, you talked a lot about disclosure in the workplace. Do you think that that has a place being taught almost explicitly in schools? There's so many legal issues with who has access to what information about students. Do you think there's a value to teaching them that skill about when they can disclose and when it's valuable?
Starting as early as humanly possible, yes, absolutely. All this stuff that we're talking about can be indoctrinated into people early on. And especially with school kids, I'll tell you something too. You wait too long, you don't want to give this stuff to kids when they're going through puberty. They got enough things going on, okay, about who they are in relation to the rest of the world, as well as all the physical stuff. As early as humanly possible, you want to do this. The other thing to, also remember about those schoolings, in essence, you're doing an incredible disservice to do anything but, because you're teaching the kids about who they are, in those environments. And if you're going to be vague about the words, about their diagnoses or what have you, then in essence, they may be challenged, but they pick stuff like that up. And so they too start to think of what they have, whatever it is, in shameful whispers. And that affects their psyche, their capacity for self-esteem, and their confidence. Thank you for asking that.
Okay, we just have time for one last question, anybody?
Going back to how you talk about building a trade, how you talk about, meanwhile, if you're unemployed, how there's a good suggestion. Like in the case of learning a trade, for example, I know there would be some schools, for example, that would charge a tuition. How would it be possible if the person doesn't have a source of income, for example?
That is the age-old question that also affects a lot of people other than people on the spectrum or people with disabilities. And it's a struggle that people are having right now, and a lot of folks, I think, would tell you that, when you look at things like the student debt that hampers kids today, late into their postgraduate lives, that one could argue that the value of a college education has never been less. But at the same point, I would also strongly recommend that you still get that college education only because your potential or your possibilities are really limited. And also just as a way to keep growing up. You know, these schools aren't just places to learn. They're also places for us to socialize and learn how to socialize. That's half of what we go to school for, believe it or not. But in answer to your question, I would say the only thing to do, other than that we eventually get a more fair and equitable pay distribution manner of doing business in this country. Income discrepancy is, to me, the biggest problem we have. I would say that you have to become a really great student at finding scholarships, because there are so many weird scholarships that are out there at various universities that so few people actually take advantage of. And I would just really, really hit the books on searching through as many of those as you possibly can.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Michael John Carley, thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome.